Have you ever noticed how easy it is to recognize the truth about someone else's situation versus your own? And here's what's interesting. When it comes to ourselves, it can sometimes be very difficult to recognize the truth and the reality about our own situations. When we see other people going through things, we can often see probably we can point out the patterns, the warning signs, the red flags, what's not working, perhaps a conversation they need to have with themselves or perhaps with somebody else. Also, the types of decisions that they probably need to consider or even need to make. And then also, it may be easy for us when it comes to other people to be able to point out that the reality that they need to acknowledge and they need to accept. But here's what's interesting when it comes to our own individual lives. So instead of looking outward, we're looking inward. Instead of pointing the finger at somebody else, we're pointing the finger at ourselves. That becomes a little bit more complicated, I think. And here's the thing, and it's not because I think reality is necessarily hard to see, but I think sometimes the reality of our situations is often difficult to accept, especially when it's about us. And so with that, we're going to deep dive into this topic. So with that, if you're returning if you're a returning listener, I just want to welcome you back to another episode of The Next Baseline. And if this is your first time listening to The Next Baseline, I just want to give you a warm welcome. I'm the podcast host of Danny DeJesus, and this podcast is where we explore one question and one key central question, and that is, what do we build now to reach our next baseline? And in the last episode, we talked about and we explored the concept of collapse, which is the first phase of the life transition framework that I have been working on and and defining over the last year called C2R2E. And you see, when we talk about collapse, we talked about the idea that collapse is not necessarily having to do only with crisis. It can sometimes be much quieter than that. And it's also not always have to does not always have to deal with failure. It's not a and it's also not a command to blow up your life. And simply put, what collapse is, as a reminder, it's a signal. It's just information, nothing more, nothing less. Collapse is about growing awareness that something is simply just not working the way it used to in your life. And once we receive the signal, and once we're clear about what the signal is, I think another challenge tends to appear. And that challenge is the next phase of the C2R2E framework. And this phase we call confrontation, which is phase two. Now, I think when people hear the word confrontation, I think sometimes our minds can take us straight into conflict. So think of like things like arguments, tensions, disagreements. And here's what I want to be clear. Confrontation in alignment in accordance with C2R2E, that's not what this is about. Okay. The confrontation phase two of C2R2E, is not about confronting other people, but it's about really confronting reality for yourself. Because reality can be quite difficult to face at times. And I don't want to say it's because we're weak. And I don't want to say it's because, not that we're weak or that we lack the ability to do so, but it's just hard. It's just very, very difficult because reality is going to often ask us to let go of a story that we've been telling ourselves for a period of time. We could have been telling ourselves a certain story or certain narrative that probably has been challenged for weeks, months, sometimes even years. And when that narrative doesn't transpire the way we thought it would, it could definitely be a gut punch. And sometimes a story, it can sound like this, and see if it resonates with you. Things will eventually go back to normal, whatever that means. If I just wait long enough, things will fix themselves. Nothing really needs to change right now, does it? This isn't as serious as it feels. Well, if the ship is sinking, it's pretty serious. Or the classic, I'm fine, or I'm okay. Or when you ask someone, hey, how's your day going? I'm all right. What does that even mean? Because truth be told, I'm fine, I'm okay. There's probably a little bit more to it, especially for those that are in relationships. And not that I'm picking on anybody necessarily out there, but for the men out there, if you ask your wife or your girlfriend, your significant other, how's it going? And they just say, I'm fine. Chances are they're probably not fine. And so with that said, I think these stories that we tell ourselves, I think they help us cope or handle a situation. It might be for a while, but I think eventually the reality of the situation is going to eventually catch up to you. And when it does, and it's not even if it's going to happen, it's a matter of when. We have a choice to make. We can continue avoiding and arguing with the reality, or what we can actually do is we can actually begin learning from it. And one of the most important things I think I've learned that I'm sharing, across this podcast, across my work, is that the reality that we face every single day, it doesn't require our agreement. It doesn't require our consent. Because here's the thing, it simply just exists. A relationship may have changed, and that could be romantic, friends, it could be the relationship you have with your children, it could be a relationship you have with colleagues. The point is, relationships change. A chapter or a season of life may have ended, and it could have ended abruptly. Or you could have seen it coming. You can see the end coming, but you try to avoid the ending. I think a lot of us get trapped in this one. A career may no longer fit the way we felt about it a couple of years ago. That dream job may not feel like a dream anymore, but it pays the bills, right? And I'm not saying, by all means, I'm not saying go quit your job or go blow up your life. Let's have a little bit of wisdom and discernment here. But the point is, you may be saying to yourself, if you're in this moment of confrontation, hey, my career is not what I want it to be. I want something more. It doesn't mean you have to quit your job. It doesn't mean you have to quit what you're doing. It just means you have to have an honest conversation of what this now means for you moving forward for your life, and start planning what to do next. Another piece here is, let's look at our habits. A habit that may no longer serve you, whether that things you shouldn't be doing, perhaps sleep habits, eating habits, financial habits. There's a lot of habits out there that may no longer serve the person that you're wanting to become. And then also, and I think this goes in hand with the patterns in our life that may be creating problems that we just refuse to give up. And in confrontation, we have to decide consciously, um, do I have a problem? Does something need to change? And here's the thing, reality doesn't become less true because we dislike it. We don't have to like it. And the longer I think we fight reality, the more exhausted I think we're going to become over the span of time. because eventually that exhaustion is going to catch up. And eventually we're going to get sick and tired of being sick and tired. So think about how much energy, when we think about exhaustion, think about how much energy it takes to maintain an illusion, a facade, to pretend, to explain things away, to imagine something else, to justify, to rationalize, to avoid, distract, pretend. All those things are just exhausting. And many people don't even realize how much energy that they're actually expending, defending a version of reality that no longer exists. And here's the thing, we only have so much mental energy and mental space, mental real estate that we can use per day. And after that's used up, it's used up. How do you want to spend it? Is my question to you. Do you want to spend it defending a version of yourself that you think exists but never really existed or has stopped existing for a while? Versus finally being honest with yourself and saying something needs to change. So, which I think is a good segue to talk about why one of the reasons confrontations feel so uncomfortable is because it's going to involve pain. It's going to involve grief of some sort. And it doesn't necessarily have to be grief over a person. Sometimes it's going to be over an expectation, a dream, an identity that you felt that you had, something that you were working towards, a future that you thought you were building, or a version of life that you assumed would just continue on. And when the reality of life tells you otherwise, and chances are it's been telling you for a while, you just have chose not to listen. It's going to be a period of mourning. There's no sense in running from it. In fact, we should be embracing this because the sooner we embrace this, the sooner we can start moving through the process of transformation and growth. So, with that, this is where I think many people get stuck. In collapse, when we think about collapse, that's the event. Okay. The event, when we talk about collapse, that can happen in an instant. We may, in the phase of collapse, we may be in a state of denial, but eventually we will move into this phase of confrontation. And I think we get stuck because here's the thing. It's hard. Confronting yourself and the challenges and the messiness of life can be difficult. But here's the thing. Once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. And yet acting on that truth is not always going to be simple. People get, I think, caught in the middle of themselves. They get conflicted. Do I deal with this? Do I not? Can I push this off for a while? And here's the thing, we know it's not working, but sometimes we don't even know what to do about it yet. We're trying to figure it out. But sometimes we spend a little too long trying to figure it out. Because at the end of the day, what confrontation teaches us or is trying to push us through is accepting what change actually means. And sometimes that change that we have to make is a very uncomfortable place to be. And here's what I've come to believe. Acceptance is not an agreement. It's not an approval. It's not a surrender. What acceptance is, it's simply just acknowledging that the reality exists. Nothing more, nothing less. You can accept, for example, a difficult health diagnosis without liking it. You can accept that a relationship has changed without wanting it to. For example, you can accept that a divorce is happening even though you never wanted it. You can accept that a chapter of your life is coming to an end without celebrating it. Acceptance is a form of clarity. And clarity, I think, is very powerful. Because once reality is acknowledged, energy, mental real estate is going to become available for you again. Energy that was previously being spent resisting, defending, avoiding, or explaining, now that energy can be redirected towards understanding. Think of it this way. At least for me, I'm going to talk from personal experience here. I can't stand lying. It's very hard to maintain lies because it takes a lot of energy to think about the lie, to maintain the lie, versus just telling the truth, even if the truth hurts. I have been known to be brutally honest with people. In fact, this podcast is intended to be brutally honest with people, with listeners. Telling the truth, no matter how ugly that truth looks like, in my opinion, it's better than telling the most beautiful lie that you can come up with. Because eventually that beautiful lie is going to be ugly. Versus embracing the truth now, the ugly truth, the truth that we've been avoiding. Eventually that ugly truth morphs into something beautiful. But again, that's my opinion. And it may take time. But the inverse of that is telling a beautiful lie today, only 6 months pass and you find out the truth. And now the truth becomes very, very, very devastating. Versus now going through the pain once through hearing the brutal truth the first time. Now you're navigating how you feel about the lie, how long the lie kept on going for, and then you're also faced with the brutal truth. So all we did was we just avoided the inevitable. But again, that's my opinion. So I would encourage everybody, just tell the truth. So with that, once you have that energy to that enables you to redirect that energy into something more meaningful, you can achieve a better understanding. You can more effectively begin to go on a path of growth, learning. You can plan different things, and then you can prepare also more effectively. And that's where I think something interesting begins to happen. Because once the reality of the situation of your life, whatever it happens to be, is accepted and accepted 100% for what it is, I think new questions start to emerge. Not why is this happening, but rather, what do I do now with this? And it's not necessarily about how do I get back, because again, going back to the name of this podcast, the next baseline, this whole process of C2R2E is about reaching that next baseline. We can never go back to the life that we had. That life that we had is gone. We can't take it back. The old life that we used to live is gone. In fact, the person we were yesterday is dead and gone. We only have the present right now, and then we have the future to embrace. So with that, life is built on collapsible moments that we have to confront with truth so that we can start thinking about the ways and the means and what it takes to reach that next baseline, to be able to identify what am I going to build next? And those questions are going to signal the beginning of forward movement and action. Because when we stop fighting the reality, we start to become capable of working with it. And here's the thing, we have to be, we can't change something that we're not willing to be honest about. Change happens when we can be honest about something. Because if we're not honest about whatever it is that we're not wanting to be honest about, it's hard to change it. But the moment we decide and we make a deliberate decision in whatever it is to say, hey, this is happening, now we get to author a new chapter. If we're not happy with the state of our lives, let's be honest about that so that we can put the energy in to what the life to whatever it is that we want our lives to be. So with that, I want to be careful with a couple things here because confrontation is not about rushing to answers. It's not about making impulsive decisions. So if you're already trying to do some action, I'm going to tell you we may want to pause a little bit because collapse and confrontation, it's not intended to take immediate action. These first two phases are meant to be introspective, meant to have a conversation with you. And it's not done in a day. It's not done in a matter of minutes. It's sometimes not even done in a week or two. These stages, especially when you get to confrontation, is going to, the moment you can be honest about something, it's intended to help drive the wisdom and the discernment that you're going to need to get into the next phase that we're going to talk about in a subsequent episode. And that is going to be realignment. Okay, so I would encourage you, don't rush to any action or making any impulsive decisions because it's not about immediately changing everything right now, but rather it's about understanding. It's about seeing more clear, getting more honest, and then separating facts from assumptions. And again, facts cannot be disputed. Assumptions are just things that we think is true. And assumptions can be proven false. So we can't be attached to things that we believe. We want to get away from things like wishful thinking because ultimately, the ultimate goal of confrontation is going to be reaching a sense of clarity. Because clarity is going to create something valuable. And I've already mentioned this term. It's going to provide you with the ability to obtain a level of discernment, the ability to recognize what actually requires change and what doesn't, what belongs to you and what doesn't belong to you, what is a signal and what is simply fear. And that's why confrontation matters. Because wise action is going to require clear understanding. So before we close, because I've taken quite a bit of your time in today's episode, before we close and conclude today's episode, I like you to spend some time reflecting on a few questions I'm going to send your way. I have 4. Usually I have about 3 or 4 every single episode. And so this time I have 4. The first question is this: what reality have you been resisting? That's the first question. Second question: what truth have you been avoiding? What truth have you been avoiding? Question 3: where are you spending energy arguing with what already is? Essentially, what are you in denial about? And last question: what might become possible for you if you were able to redirect the energy you were spending on creating a facade for yourself and moving that toward understanding and reaching a sense of clarity instead? What are the possibilities? So, with that, reflect on those 4 questions. Take some time, pull out a notebook. I'm a big advocate in having quiet time and being able to silence the noise. And so, if you need to, just pause right now. This podcast episode is not going anywhere, and just spend some time with yourself, or just wait until after the episode. You can rewind back to the questions, and you can take some time and jot notes for yourself. See where your mind takes you. Spend about 10 minutes, 15 minutes at the most, and see what happens. And you never know unless you take that first step. And here's the thing, you're not doing this for anybody except for yourself. You owe nothing to anybody except you. Okay, this process of transformation is personal. It's not for the world. It's for you, the individual. And it's intended to help your journey of growth and development and being not just a better version of yourself, but helping you reach that next level in your life, reaching the next baseline, becoming a little bit more resilient, embracing transformation, what I like to call transformational resilience, bouncing forward, understanding where you came from, what you overcame or are overcoming, and then turning that into who you will be becoming. So with that, if collapse, going back to our first phase here of the C2R2E framework, if collapse is the signal, confrontation then is understanding that signal, is understanding that information. It's where your awareness is now going to become clarity. It's where we stop asking whether something is wrong and we start asking a new question: what is true? And once we begin seeing this clearly, we become ready for the next phase of the journey. And I mentioned this already, and that third phase of C2R2E we call realignment. And realignment is the phase where we actually begin building the new baseline. And that's just a commencement. So with that, I'm Danny DeJesus, and this has been another episode of The Next Baseline. The links to the entire Elevatus ecosystem is going to be in the description below. And so until next time, continue to ask the question, what do we build now to reach our next baseline? So with that, I'm going to wish you all the peace, love, joy, happiness, and all the well wishes in the world for you. And I can't wait to connect with you on another episode. Until next time.